It is Jack Gill, and today I am joined by James Pearce from The Athletic. Of course, a big welcome to James. James, I'm going to get started with a question about a player who many people now know the name of, and that is Curtis Jones. You know, his rise over the past 2-3 seasons has been absolutely outstanding, and not just that, his evolution as a player, you know, from the left winger and number 10 we saw him for the under-23s and the under-18s at LFC to now the player he is today. What have you made of him this season?
Yeah, I'd say in a really difficult and challenging season, Curtis Jones has been, you know, one of the real kind of shining lights in terms of his development and progress that we've seen. I think, you know, you're right. It's amazing to think how far he's come in a relatively short period of time, because I remember following that kind of UEFA Youth League campaign under Steven Gerrard when, you know, he was a wide forward who essentially was brilliant when he was on the ball, but didn't really offer you anything when you didn't have it, because he very much was, you know, would wait until someone gave him the ball, and then even then he was so gifted. But it was a case of, I remember watching him thinking, is someone going to be able to channel all that ability the right way? Because, you know, sometimes I think Steven Gerrard would be pulling his hair out of the sight of Curtis, you know, beating the same man 2, 3, 4 times just because he could, because he was so much better than the fullback he was coming up against, which was obviously great to watch at times. But I think, you know, decision making probably needed to be improved at times. And yeah, and then I think back to when he was thrown in at the deep end in that FA Cup tie against Wolves at Molineux. And, you know, and I think it's fair to say probably he wasn't ready at the time then to make the step up to the senior ranks. And but yeah, since then, I mean, it's, you know, it's been a real kind of meteoric rise in terms of, when I watch him play now, it's hard to believe it. He is that same young player, because he's so good off the ball now in terms of, and I don't just mean work rate, I mean in terms of intelligence, in terms of, you know, shutting down space, knowing when to press, when not to press, tracking runners. I thought he was absolutely brilliant recently in that defeat to Man City, and because of the nature of things, because of what happened in terms of Liverpool capitulating in the closing stages, it just gets forgotten. But you know, he was Liverpool's, you know, best player for me that day. And you can see the big games he's getting trusted with by Klopp as well. That you can see he has that trust of the manager now, which is huge. And I know, you know, I think you'd have to say as well, of course, he's benefited from the fact that the injuries have meant, you know, with Henderson and Fabinho having to play centre half at times, there's been a shortage of midfielders. So of course that has given him probably more chances than he would have got. But, you know, he hasn't half then grasped those opportunities that have come his way, because, you know, he's still been getting picked ahead of Oxlade-Chamberlain, ahead of Shaqiri, and, you know, for me, rightly so, because you know, he's a class act, and now he's got the, you know, the attitude and the tactical intelligence to go with the ability that the academy staff always knew he had.
Yeah, it's interesting you point to that game at the Molineux, because that's the one I always point to, because, you know, as you perfectly summed up there, it came a bit too soon for Curtis Jones. And, you know, since then his rise has been phenomenal. You know, the summer after, you thought there were lots of rumours that he may go out on loan. Instead, he was made captain of the under-23s by Neil Critchley. And then he was obviously phenomenal for the under-23s last season. Every opportunity he got with the first team, he grasped with both hands. But as I say, I think it's been the evolution of him that has impressed Liverpool fans the most, because you see him coming through as the left winger, the inside forward, you know, the number 10, and you think, how is he going to get into this Liverpool side? How is he going to push the likes of Sadio Mane or make Klopp change his plans and play with a natural 10? But instead, he's worked his way into Klopp's plans as a number 8, and a typical Klopp number 8, and it's working well for him.
Yeah, 100%. And I think also his kind of development shows there isn't like one set blueprint for talented young players in terms of how best to mould them into being, hopefully, you know, a Liverpool regular. You know, some players do really benefit from the loan system, but you don't have to go out on loan to be able to develop. I think that's something we've seen, you know, probably Trent Alexander-Arnold is the perfect example of that. and now Curtis, similar in terms of just being in that environment on a day-to-day basis, working with Klopp, working with such elite players, and I definitely get the sense that as well as the technique, which has clearly been honed, it's the other sides of his game which have come on so much and have impressed Pep Lijnders and the other members of staff, because I know James Milner kind of pushed him and kind of tested him just to see what he was made of in terms of how much do you really want this. It's all well and good. Self-confidence is absolutely crucial in a young player, but sometimes it can be a fine line between having that self-belief in yourself and thinking that things will just automatically happen. You have to want it. You need that hunger and fire in your belly and drive. And and I think that's the big thing with Curtis, is that he's now earned the respect of all those senior players because they've seen his attitude, they've seen his work rate, and now I think when and of course there's going to be times when he's still 20 years of age. He's still got a lot to learn. So you don't want to get too carried away. And of course he's not going to light every single game up. It's just not realistic at that age. But I think the big thing now is when you see his name on the team sheet, you don't think, oh God, I wonder if that might be a bit of a weak link today, or I think he looks like he belongs in that Liverpool midfield. And for me, probably the best example recently was his performance in the first leg against Leipzig, because I thought he was absolutely brilliant on the night. And when you think that is the absolute biggest of stages in the knockout stages of the Champions League.
So from him to another player that rose through the ranks last season and is now a part of Klopp's plans, and that is young Neco Williams. He's in a bit of an awkward position in terms of this current Liverpool squad. A lot of people, I think, some fans want to see him improved upon in terms of the Liverpool first team squad. He's obviously not getting as much game time this season and spending a lot of time on the first team bench rather than with the under-23s. What do you make of his current squad position, James?
I think, again, it goes back to what we were saying before about Curtis, is young players always have peaks and troughs, and things are not always going to be straightforward for them. And Nico's had some difficult times, there's no doubt about that, but he is a big talent. I really like Neco Williams, and he's still, I think sometimes because a player can burst onto the scene at quite an early age, and you feel as if it feels like Neco Williams has been around for quite a while, and then I just checked then, and it was like actually he's still a teenager who is I think he doesn't turn 20 till April. So I just think you need to be patient with someone like him, and it made me feel quite sick, to be honest, some of the stick I saw he got on social media earlier on this season, and just it's grim. And I know people then say, well, why do these players even look at it? Why just ignore it? But I think especially at a time when there's no fans inside grounds, kind of social media tends to be the only way you get kind of feedback on how people think you're doing. And it's we know it's not a great kind of barometer of what proper Liverpool fans think. But so that was pretty horrible, the fact that he hasn't been the only one to go through that, but clearly that hurt him, and that can damage the confidence of a young lad. But and I think the other thing to say with Neco Williams is he's trying to get in and trying to live up to the best right back in European football for me. And yes, I'm sure Trent Alexander-Arnold would be the first to admit he hasn't always performed to the heights we know he can perform at this season, and there's mitigating circumstances for that, with Trent not getting a pre-season, getting COVID, getting the calf injury, and then the collective malaise that's set in the team that's been heavily depleted by injuries anyway. But when people say to me, "Oh, you need a better backup for Trent," well, for a start, who do you go and get? Because nobody's getting in ahead of Trent Alexander-Arnold, because he's young, he's incredible. incredibly gifted. He's when he's on form, he can dictate a game from right back. He's so influential. So if I'm making a list of areas that this Liverpool squad need reinforcing in, then a backup right back really doesn't feature that high up on my list, for just because I think there's much more important things. And also I just think Neco Williams is a big talent who we need to show some patience with and faith with. And who knows, maybe next season he may need a loan spell. We'll have to wait and see what happens. But it's he's shown more than enough for me, Neco Williams, so far, to know that he's going to have a really good career. And whether that is at Liverpool or somewhere else, I think is far too soon to say. But no, I really rate Neco Williams highly.
Yeah, I agree. And as you mentioned there, the stick he got at the start of the season was just abysmal to see. And, I think it's been very tough for him that he hasn't been able to play his way through what happened then, because, he's had a distinct lack of game time since then. But, like you said, an outstanding talent. And it's important to remember at the start of last season, not many Liverpool fans had heard of this lad, and his rise has been incredible, because we talk about Curtis Jones. We knew of him before his rise, but Neco Williams was a lad that not many Liverpool fans had heard of.
No, that's true. And, and when you think that he's still a teenager that's played 20 odd first team games for Liverpool, he's a Wales international, he's it goes back to what we said before about just sometimes you need to just take a step back and just remember that he's at an age where a lot of kids, people he would have played football with in younger years, are still desperately trying to even prove they could command a place in the senior training squad and maybe get on the bench. And so he's done amazingly well to have got where he's got already. And yeah, I think it's fair to say this season probably hasn't gone exactly the way he would have loved it to have gone. But yeah, he'll be back strong, no doubt about that.
And Harvey Elliott, James, there's been some talk about him recently, probably mostly due to the injuries we've had as well, and people suggesting that, keeping him around may have been a good option this season. We know he's been outstanding at Blackburn during his loan move. There's talk of him making, Championship Team of the Season, talk of him getting Young Player of the Season in the Championship. It really has been a successful loan move for him. What do you make of his loan move? Do you think Liverpool made the right decision to send him out on loan? And also, what a big boost to have, the tribunal fee sorted and just £4 million for a player who looks like he's going to be an exceptional talent for many years to come.
Yeah, I think, first of all, I do think Liverpool made the right call loaning him out. I think, have there been games this season where if he'd been on the bench, he could have potentially come on and made a difference? Yes, probably, but not a huge amount. And in fact, the way that, despite the injuries decimating Klopp's squad, the top end of the pitch, actually hasn't, it hasn't been that badly affected. And, with all the will in the world, he's not going to be getting in ahead of Sadio Mane or Mohamed Salah regularly. And I just think at that stage in his career, I just think you've got sometimes you've got to look at the longer term rather than just the short term. And I just think for both his and Liverpool's long term benefit, a season in the Championship, playing week in, week out at a tough level, because I think that's the other thing that we've all watched under 23s football at times, and it's not great. It's not. I don't think that under 23s football really prepares you for the leap. It's an absolute chasm between under 23s football and first team football. And I just think sometimes, going out on loan can help bridge that gap. And the Championship is a tough league, and you only have to look at how well he's done at Blackburn, and the glowing references from the players there and the words of Tony Mowbray to know that he's been a big hit, not just in terms of his ability, but the way in which he's conducted himself off the pitch as well. So no, I think Liverpool will reap the rewards of that. It'd be interesting to see what happens with Harvey for next season, because I think it's probably difficult to say because we don't know what's going to happen between now and the end of the season. Will have an impact on what Liverpool can do in the transfer market this summer, and then obviously what happens in the market in terms of incomings and outgoings will probably influence his place in the pecking order. But I think he's got a genuine chance of playing a part next season, because he is a massive talent, and I think it was crazy how long it took for the tribunal to meet, and I think probably Fulham felt by leaving it that the more and more he progressed would almost show that the fee should be higher and higher. But as it was, the decision, it has to be based purely on what he'd done up to the point where he did move clubs. And from what I've seen of Harvey Elliott so far and what everyone says about him, I think that fee that Liverpool will end up paying for him is small change in comparison to what he's actually worth.
Yeah, and you talk about what will happen to Harvey Elliott next season. I'm sure there'll be many clubs keeping their eye on it in terms of a loan move as well. If he's not in our plans, talking Championship clubs, I'm talking bottom end Premier League clubs. I think there'll be a lot of teams with their eye on Harvey Elliott's situation at Liverpool next season. But yeah, what a brilliant thing for Liverpool to settle on that 4 million. I know Fulham wanted close to 10 million, and Scott Parker himself has obviously come out and said that he's a bit upset that they lost him for so cheap. Paul Glatzel as well. He's a lad that Jurgen Klopp has spoke about on a number of occasions, and after that incredible Youth Cup run that Liverpool had a couple of years ago, which we ended up going on to win. His strike partnership throughout that season with Bobby Duncan was outstanding, and obviously we saw the situation with Bobby Duncan where he ended up moving on. Paul Glatzel has had a couple of long-term injuries since then and came back this season, has had a lengthy layoff again, COVID, and that didn't help him. He came back from injury yesterday during the 3-1 win against Salford in a friendly. Do you think he can break into the first team soon?
I really hope so. I think the big thing for Glatzel now is just to try and stay fit and get a sustained run of academy games under his belt. I think certainly I don't expect to see him anywhere near the first team between now and the end of the season. I think it's very much one eye on next season. If I was him, I'm sure in his head he's got pre-season. Can I get myself in a position where I feel physically like I'm back to top shape and ready to try and prove a point in pre-season in July, because we know that it's such a key period under Klopp. We've seen it with a lot of young players who have been given chances in pre-season, and then if you deliver on the training field and in the games, you get kept around. And Klopp, he was genuine with the real warm words of praise for Glatzel. I think I think he did his ACL, didn't he, at Tranmere in a pre-season friendly, and that was really, really cruel, because there's no doubt that I remember the week before Klopp had been saying we've got Paul Glatzel training with us, and he isn't honestly an option for this season, and then suddenly within a week it's not only is it's pre-season over, it's the entire season over. And then I think earlier on this season issue, and which quite happens quite often when a player has a really bad serious injury, they come back and then they pick up niggling other problems, and that seems to have been the case for Glatzel. So I think it's very difficult to say what will happen with him, because I think the other thing you'd have to say is the bar is so high, isn't it? We're talking about if he was going to get in that Liverpool team, it would be as the number 9. And I think he's got a lot to prove before we get to a point where we think he's a viable option for that. But that's the challenge facing him. And but yeah, not one for the next few months. Definitely, I think pre-season will be massive for him.
Yeah, especially in a summer where Liverpool may look to increase their options in the front line. It might be difficult for Paul Glatzel, but I was thinking maybe a loan next season or something, see if he can get some first team games in and, a full season at a decent level, playing first team football. That might be nice for him.